actually have your jersey retired. And, I mean, anywhere it's special. But, you know, the University of North Carolina, I mean, that's almost like going to heaven.
Knowing that long after I'm gone, my son and grandchildren will go up there and they'll see my jersey hanging there, and it's something that I'm very proud of.
You know, you stop practice and you point to the jersey and say, you know, Michael Jordan, you know, he dove on a loose ball in practice, so you better dive on a loose ball too.
The general link for us in recruiting was to, if you see these jerseys and you know these names and how great they are now in the NBA or how great they have been, you could be like that. If you come here, you'll have the same opportunity that were afforded to these guys.
And just to look up there and see the jerseys, and you see Phil Ford, and that reminds you of the story of Phil Ford, and you see George Lynch, and you remember the 1993 championship team, and a chill goes down my spine.
If I was up there by myself, it would be no fun. If I was the only guy up there, it wouldn't mean anything. But to be up there next to Perkins, Jordan, Doherty, Wallace, Stackhouse, that makes it fun.
It is the who's who of college basketball. It is the you know, highest honor you can get from this basketball program is to have your jersey up there in the rafters, because you did something special at the most special basketball program in the country.
Eddie Cameron, who played against Carmichael and then was the athletic director at Duke, talked about what a finesse player he was, a great shooter. He had great style on the court. And he was the first great Carolina basketball player.
He was an All-American in 1923, the first Carolina player to be ever recognized in any sport as an All-American.
The 1924 team that Carmichael played on was the national champion, named by the Helms Foundation. They went 26-0, and he and Jack Cobb were the two stars on that great basketball team. And his brother, Billy Carmichael, who Carmichael Auditorium is named after, also played in that team. That was the first time that two brothers had played on the Carolina basketball team together.
One sports writer of that period noted that he looked better oftentimes missing a shot than a good many players of that era did when they made their shots. Carolina went 56-7 during Carmichael's 3 varsity seasons and won 2 Southern Conference titles in addition to the 1924 national championship.
A lot of people, when they walk into the Smith Center and they look up and they see the banner that says Jordan 8, they ask us, you know, don't we know Michael Jordan's number? We do. We know Michael wore 23, but Jim Jordan wore number 8, and Jim Jordan was the first Jordan All-America at North Carolina. And he starred in the 1946 team with Hook Dillon and Bones McKinney, and was a great player here, an outstanding shooter, and was part of that 46 team that was the first Carolina team to play in the Final Four.
He sometimes gets lost in all the conversation about John Hook Dillon and Bones McKinney. He and Bones played on either side of Hook. They had the responsibility, when not scoring, to get the ball inside to Dillon for his sweeping hook shot. But Jim Jordan in his own right was a good shooter, averaged about 11 points a game, steady ball handler, solid rebounder, and a real leader of that team. I don't think he gets enough credit for the leadership he provided over those 2 years.
Well, Hook Dillon was the leading scorer on the 1946 team that went to the Final Four. The leading scorer, even though it was 12.9 points a game. But the hook shot is described in the newspaper accounts as being a deadly accurate hook shot.
He was an amazing scorer, but it was all hook shot. If he was close, he wasn't much of a foul shooter. I tried to get him to shoot foul shots with a hook, but he wouldn't do it.
That was the only way that I could shoot a basketball. I didn't know to shoot any other way, and I didn't find out until I was at Chapel Hill that it was a hook shot. I just didn't know what it was. That was just the only way that I could shoot.
In the Final Four and in the NCAA tournament that year, he scored 16, 15, and 16 points in the last 3 games, and at that time, that was just a phenomenal feat.
Tommy was an excellent dribbler, an excellent backcourt man, very quick, had a good two-handed set shot.
I was only 5'11", but I was about 185, 190 pounds. People had a lot of trouble dealing with me physically. I was physically stronger than most of the people I played against, and I could control the game and tempo. And I think that was pretty much what I brought to the table. We went in for a last-minute check over, and he said, "Tommy, you ready?" I said, "Ready for what?" He said, "To jump against Wilt." I said, "Hell yeah." And that was it.
Well, it was funny when you saw it, because not only was Tommy 5'10", I guess, but he was crouching down, like he's going to jump. There's no way you're going to jump against Chamberlain.
He didn't like that very much. I'll tell you, he kind of looked down with me with a little scour and kind of get on with things. I must say that I didn't make a valiant effort to try and get the jump, but I really think that set the tone for the game, and I think in the back of their minds, they were wondering what the hell we were going to do next, and that was a great ploy. My good friend Frank DeFord says that was clearly my defining moment, and that what will appear in my obit, Tommy Kearns, who jumped center against Wilt Chamberlain. I was very fortunate to be a part of the program early on. We were, I think, helpful in establishing the traditions of Carolina basketball, and it's something that's very, very special to Tommy Kearns.
Great rebounder, very good rebounder, and just a good teammate, just a very good teammate. The one ball game, Johnny Green, who was a great ball player, can jump almost over the basket. He was on the foul line, and we were 2 points down, and with about 6 seconds left to go. And it's a one-on-one. If he makes it, the game's over, because back then there was no three-point play. So what happens, he misses it, and Pete Brennan gets the rebound. He dribbles the length of the court and takes a jump shot from the foul line to tie up the ball game with about 3 seconds left to go.
He just got the ball, got the rebound, and knew there was only 7 or 8 seconds left, and knew that he was good enough to do what he had to do. Just took it down and did it.
You go back to McGuire's training, Coach McGuire's training. We were in that situation in many practices. We're down, we got the ball. What do you do with 6 seconds to go? Do you call timeout, or do you head down the court? And he head down the court. That's what he did.
I think in the Carolina tradition, he's probably one of the more underrated players. Great jumper, great rebounder, really good shooter, and the shot that he made against Michigan State, that's one of the great, great shots in Carolina history.
Lee was just strength. I mean, he was a strong, big, strong ball player, had a good shot, a good rebounder, and he took my place the following year. And I really sincerely believe that if Joe Quigg did not get hurt, they are back in the NCAA finals. But when they lost Quigg, it really hurt them.
Great physical talent, great basketball body, could shoot the ball well, very strong, and clearly became one of the great players in Carolina history. Went on to the pros and had a very good career, although short, a very good career in the NBA. Yorkie and I went to high school together. Yorkie had some knee and hip problems, and it was decided that he would have an operation on his knees and hip, which took him out of his sophomore year. He would have been on that NCAA team with us and had an operation, and it took him a while to get over that. But that's the one thing that I'm always a little sad about. And Yorkie, to this day, is a very, very good friend of mine, and I would have loved to have had him around in the backcourt with me.
Yorkie, tremendous shooter. Tremendous. I've never seen anybody take a foul shot like Yorkie. The ball went in his hand, it was gone. And in most cases, it went in. And the M&M boys, Mo and Luisi, I mean, just tremendous. They had a good ball club that year.
Yorkie was a great shooter. He and I have a lot of discussions on the subject, and I still maintain that Lennie was a better shooter than he was, but he's not sure. But he had a great touch. He and Lennie were two of the best I think that we've ever had.
probably as good an all-around player as I've ever played with or seen play. He could defend, he was a tremendous passer, he could score the ball, and had a great feel for the game. And was one of the most underrated players, I think, ever to play the game.
I feel like I'm coaching him all my life, or he's coaching me. I don't know which, but Doug and I started out together as when he was sophomore. When I moved to Chapel Hill, he helped me move the washer and dryer into the house. So, but he is a special young man who was a great basketball player. He led the ACC in rebounding. He couldn't come close to dunking, or his jumping wasn't great, but he had quickness, competitiveness. So we're pleased that Doug is still very much a Carolina person. Mentioned Doug Moe, everybody smiles. They have great. He comes in the room, everything lights up.
I enjoy life. I just like to be happy, and I just wish everybody could be as happy as I am. I look at everything positive. Just the whole time here for me was terrific.
I became a Carolina basketball fan early on. Being Jewish and, you know, hearing about Lennie Rosenbluth and his success was something that, you know, I recognized right off the bat. And then being a guard and watching the way Tommy Kearns play, the way he played, I became a big fan of his right from the beginning.
We put Larry in the middle of the four corners, and he'd chase, try to get the ball, turn and drive, or pass against his own press and score. And then I thought, well, some teams may show a zone press and sneak into a man-to-man. So I had Larry, you know, he didn't know what was happening, but I told the defense to start in his own press and sneak into a man-to-man, and then I expected Larry, who was very bright, to see that, and then he would call our man-to-man delay game, you know, and he didn't see it, but he went by his man and threw it to somebody for a layup, and well, hey, maybe we can do this against man too.
I guess it was because I wasn't smart enough to recognize a change in defense that maybe that's the way it happened. I think he would have figured it out.
With Larry out there, we had speed and quickness and leadership ability, which he demonstrated as a junior and, of course, as a captain as a senior. So, no, he was a special young man in our program.
To represent your country and then the university and Coach Smith, it was an amazing experience. I'd always felt strongly about the Olympics. To now be able to say I'm the only player to ever play and coach on an Olympic team is even more incredible. You knew right off the bat he was something special. I don't know if I was in awe of his jumping ability or his athletic ability. He could just flat play. I think as a sophomore he was as good a player as there was in the country. But to play with him, you knew you were playing with somebody who was special. And then I got to coach him later on. And I've said this numerous times, I've never coached a player that had a better year than Billy when I coached him for the Carolina Cougars. He probably had as fine a year as any player I've ever been around. You know, his college career was special, but his pro career was taken to another level.
He was very strong and capable. I don't believe I ever saw him miss time a rebound in the entire time I played with him.
You know, when you talk about Billy's jumping ability, why he was a great rebounder here and in the pros, he could just be standing there and explode up. We wouldn't have our program, what we have at North Carolina, without Billy Cunningham.
I think what I remember more than anything was the relationship and the friendships that I had with my teammates, and how much I enjoyed every minute of my experience at Chapel Hill. From Coach Smith to all my teammates to my classmates it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Well, Bobby Lewis was a pogo stick, a white guy that could jump out of the gym, so to speak, and was a phenomenal leaper, but also could shoot the ball extremely well from outside and did post up back then quite a bit, even at 6'3". Of course, back then, the athletes of today, the 6'10", 6'11" shot blocker wasn't very prevalent, although I think Bobby today still could post up some. But a great athlete and a phenomenal ability to get the ball in the basket, and just a pogo stick. It was like he was coming off a trampoline when he exploded up to shoot his shot.
Tremendous post player.
I know one of the great jumpers we've ever had. We've had some good ones. I put him with any of our great jumpers. But he also developed into a very good outside player.
In Coach's system, I think Coach brought out all the things this kid was capable of doing. But he was a marvelous all-around player. And you know, when you look back on Coach's early success, the kids that played small forward, you know, in that size range, like Charlie Scott and Bobby Lewis and Larry Miller and Billy Cunningham and Walter Davis, you know, they've all made their mark in Carolina basketball, and he was probably the first one.
Larry was really our first major recruit, you know, that Duke wanted, I know, and they were going so great in the 60s with Vic Bubas and recruiting, you know, all around the country. For Larry to come here, and maybe he wanted to start something, and he did.
Well, that was a real important recruiting battle because it was Duke or North Carolina, and I think that was the breakthrough for Coach Smith to get a great player over Coach Vic Bubas, who was the dominant coach at Duke at that time. And Larry broke that trend and set a stage really for others to say, wow, if he went to Chapel Hill over Duke, there must be more I need to look at, so to speak.
Tremendous leader, one that competed so hard, and almost everything he does at full force.
I came here in 1967. 67, 68 was my first year here, and Larry was a senior that year. He did some tremendous things to help us win, and I know I had done so previously before I got here. Just made clutch shot after clutch shot, and he certainly had a great senior year. Led us to the Final Four that year.
I mean, Larry's an animal. He was a complete physical, party hard, play hard kind of guy. Good practice player, great game player. When the lights came on, he was incredible. I've never been around an athlete that could push himself harder to get the most out of his ability when the game was on the line.
Well, number one, you recruit quickness and speed. Ideally, in basketball, you recruit height, and Charles, of course, had height for a guard, very good height, and then you recruit someone with very good hands and can catch the ball. He had all those three with abundance as far as quickness and speed, and you put that together with the competitiveness that Charles has always had and probably still does. You know, then you have somebody special.
He was ahead of his time at 6'5", 6'6" as a guard. He could play point guard, big guard, small forward, but he was so long and quick with the great instincts. Excellent competitor, too, had a burning desire to be successful. And, you know, you got to give him a lot of credit being the first African-American here. I mean, I was aware of some of the things, but hardly all the things that he was going through.
Not getting the ACC Player of the Year in 1969 was a real injustice to Charles and a real disappointment to all of us connected with Carolina basketball. In the late 60s and early 70s, I think the sports writers really started getting better educated and a real feel of the game and a feel of society. But that was certainly an injustice to Charles Scott.
I was upset, and Charles was upset, and I can see why. John Roach had a great year. Nothing to compare with Charles Scott.
It had to be difficult. I think he couldn't have played at a better school for that or for a better coach.
Charlie's at the circle, up for the shot, and it's good! And the ball game is over. North Carolina has won 87-85.
I remember, like it was yesterday at the timeout, we're getting the ball to Charles, of course. I told him now they're going to be running the chew, and told where the other players were to be to get an easy shot. And I don't think Charles looked anyway. He just took a couple of dribbles, and it was in from day one.
He was not afraid to take big shots. He had confidence that he could do it, and he was a special player. He was a winner.
Tomorrow to Don Johnson, however, front court to Previs. Previs lead pass to Chamberlain, underneath plays that. What a play! Bill Chamberlain on the basket!
Bill was a very smooth, silky type player. Very fluid with his shot, and just a good defender, a smart, intelligent player. Kind of a quiet guy, but a very intense athlete. A guy that I enjoyed playing with a lot.
Carl gets it cross court to Dedman, ahead to Eubank. Lead pass to Billy Chamberlain. He's underneath. He lays it up and goes. He's fouled. Great play by Chamberlain.
Bill Chamberlain, I think one of the things that I remember most Carolina fans remember was his MVP performance in the NIT in 1971. Back when the NIT was a very good tournament. Bill was a very good athlete, played in the NBA, and really, I think the highlight of his career was the NIT that year when he received the MVP award.
I thought Bill was one of the quickest jumpers underneath, but he could pass. He had much skill, and I thought maybe he might go pro at the end of his junior year, but he wanted to stay senior year, and that was one of our great teams, 1972.
What a layup! Beautiful. In the lane to Wysick, he turns, sweeping right-handed, hook goes Dennis Wysick over Julius Erving.
He was a big recruit for us because Dick DeVincio, his teammate at Ambridge, Pennsylvania, went to Duke, and I was afraid we were going to lose him there. But he came here, and he started all 3 years after the freshman team. He could score, but he also tough. I mean, rebounder, and one that you could count on every time he played the game.
He could handle himself, and again, that's one of his strengths. He could guard a guy much bigger, and he could handle guys out on the wing too. He could cover a lot of positions because of his strength and his toughness. Dennis was a kind of a leader on our team. He led by action. I mean, he did everything. He could play D, he'd rebound, he'd score when he needed to. I enjoyed Dennis. He was a strong-willed guy who did not accept losing very well, and that was good for us.
It was an amazing story the way that Robert McAdoo fit in here at Carolina. Just come in one year, coming from junior college. He was the first junior college player that Coach Smith recruited.
When we lost Tom McMillan to Maryland, we thought we had him. We had all the 4 starters coming back on the 72 team, but Mrs. McAdoo called me from Greensboro and said, all these schools are recruiting my son, why aren't you?
I played against him in high school, and he was a great scorer and didn't really think much about playing defense. In fact, I always joked with him that during a high school semifinal game, I outscored him 32-29 or something. He always denied it, but when he got to Carolina, he would see guys taking charges and diving on the floor, and I don't think he'd ever done that. And the first time he did, everybody clapped for him and cheered, and he started buying into it and really became a good defender and a hustler on the other end. Rebounding-wise, too, just really was a leader for us. He was head and shoulders above everybody.
Mac's game was wide open. He did things no one expected a big man to do. Taking those jump shots from the top of the key and far deep in the corner was something we weren't used to our center doing.
He had a great 1 year. His first team All-American, and the other players changed for him. He changed for the other players. That team was really together, and I give Mac credit. In a recruiting class, we're trying to get Tom McMillan and Burleson and Jones, all 3 of them. And Bobby's the least publicized, but of course, as it turned out, I think he had the best career.
He had great size, but he had speed and quickness of a man much smaller. Off the court, he kind of kept to himself, was kind of quiet. But on the court, this guy was probably, the most competitive, certainly one of the top 2 or 3 competitive people I've ever known.
Bobby had a great knack of being able to get to the ball and anticipate passes that were going to occur before sometimes they even happened.
Great anticipation of the passes. Could guard a point guard, could guard a center, and great instincts. And then, of course, great teaching by Coach Smith, who was a fabulous defensive coach. And if Bobby Jones was on you, you couldn't even catch the ball, let alone score if he decided you weren't going to catch it.
Learning to anticipate, learning to learn how to take a charge, not being afraid to fall down, to take the charge and scrape your knees or get some calcium deposits on your elbows or knees or whatever. And that's the thing at Carolina, when you get there, when you dive for a loose ball or you fall and take a charge, everybody's over there and they grab you and pick you up, say, way to go, and there's a reinforcement there that I don't think you see at a lot of schools. And I think that laid the groundwork for me to really buy into that and then start to do that more and more and more. And I I felt like I became a predator as a defender because of that. Before, I was just sort of, there's a shot I can try to block, I'll do it. But if, now after playing at Carolina, it was like, okay, I can really make a difference in the game because of what they showed me.
We were playing Duke. I'll never forget at Duke his senior year, and
the guy threw it in kind of slowly, and I just said, well, I'm gonna take a chance for it.
Intercepted by Duke. Here's Bobby. Layup is good. Carolina has won the game.
That's one thing that Coach Smith had taught us. It's okay to fail if you try to do something that's right, and that's what I tried to do. I went for it and I got it and ended up making the shot. So it was just a great feeling to not to even have to think about that. It becomes spontaneous when you play at Carolina.
The instincts, the ability to read, the ability to have quickness, the ability to dribble it down late in with your opposite hand, all those things. It was a great play.
They throw it over the guy, and Bobby comes out of nowhere, catches it, and one of the nicest, prettiest left-hand layups, and he didn't stop. He just went running to the dressing room, and we won the game.
Back in Carmichael, in the locker room we used to have was a little door. We'd go into the arena through about a 5-foot tall door. I don't know why it was built that way, but over the door was a little blue card, and it said, "United we stand, divided we fall." And that really epitomized, I think, Carolina basketball. We really, I felt like, played as a team, and we really didn't care who played the minutes, who got the glory. We were out there for a purpose, and that was to win the ball game and to play as a team, and I really felt like we did. Mitch was a guy that was just a really rugged kid, just a kind of a raw-boned athlete, and loved contact and loved to mix it up inside and would push you around and get you out of his way, and had a nice shot too, had a nice touch, and really was one of those guys that thought the game. Coach Smith would tell him something, and he'd listen and think about it and ponder it, and may not get it the first time, but once he got it, he would always do it.
Mitchell had a desire to fight you to the death. He was a tough guy, New York City guy, Long Island guy, and he was one of the first big guys that I was around that had a touch like he did shooting the basketball from the perimeter. And that's not taking anything from his low post game too, because I know as a point guard, if the game was tight, anytime we needed 2 points, we were going to Mitch, because if he didn't make the shot, he was fouled, and he was an excellent foul shooter too.
Mitch Kupchak's greatest asset, willingness to do whatever it took to get better. And the most coachable, do whatever the coach told you to do. And a lot of that was Coach Smith, his respect for Coach Smith. Mitch Kupchak, after he had his back surgery, and we run a mile for time, October 15th practice. The coach told Mitch he didn't have to run it. Mitch Kupchak said, if I'm going to be on this team, I'm going to run the mile. And he was just released from the doctor to even start doing anything, and went out and ran his mile under 6 minutes because he wanted to be part of the team.
Mitch went through a lot with his back and never said anything about it. Just got it up. Didn't care if he was hurt, and he wouldn't tell the coach he was hurt. He would just do what he could do, and if it wasn't effective, then the coach would have to sit him out because he would never take a back seat.
It took him a long time to realize everybody doesn't have some pain. I mean, he was amazed when he finally had his last operation to realize that, you could go through without having pain. But he'd play in all sorts of things, and he's just one special person. I was so lucky. He came here to be his coach. He's now a very close friend, but there's never been anyone with more respect from our people who have been around him than Mitch Kupchak.
Walter was the first guy that I'd seen that was his size that could outrun me. Walter was close to 6'7", but he was faster than I was. I was a little quicker than he was, but he could dribble like I could. He could shoot just like I could, and he had just great basketball skills.
If you wanted to draw a picture of someone shooting the jump shot, I think Walter Davis would have been the one you would have chosen.
Phil was my roommate my junior and senior year in college, and we would talk about certain situations in a game, and inevitably we knew that if the ball game came down to one shot, the person that we won the ball in his hands was Walter Davis.
He did things I didn't think anybody could do on a basketball court. But there was not really a way that he couldn't score, whether it was beating somebody off the dribble, a jump shot. There wasn't too much of a weakness to his game.
He shot the ball effortlessly. Everything he did, it just seemed like he didn't have to put a lot of physical oomph into it. But yet, you couldn't stop him.
He wanted me to help, if they pressured Phil or Custer, help bring the ball up the court sometimes. I had to help Mitch, Tommy Lagarde rebound. I wasn't a shot blocker, but I was really good with anticipating passes. So Coach Smith didn't like you to reach on defense because you get your weight forward and the guy can beat you easily. But he gave a couple of Dudley Bradley, myself, the opportunity to reach because we usually came up with steals. I would describe myself as a guy that could do a little bit of everything.
Kupchak will make the long front court pass. Gets it to Walter Davis. 2-1. Walter takes the shot. It goes! The game is up! Unbelievable!
We had gone over that play a lot in case that situation came up. That's what made Coach Smith such a great coach. I was supposed to catch the ball deeper towards our basket, but I came closer to the 10-second line because I didn't want to look behind me and take my eye off the pass Mitch was throwing to me. I knew there was 3 seconds, had time enough to take a couple dribbles and just threw it up and it banked in, and I was going for a swish and it happened to bank in, so I was very lucky. Next day in practice, Coach Smith, we did the same play again. I shot an air ball.
Walter's way was to thank his teammates, thanking me for a great pass, thanking Coach Smith for running the play, thanking Bobby Jones for 2 steals and, a layup and 2 free throws, and John Kuster for a steal and a layup. That was his way. It didn't take much credit, and that was just the way Walter was. That was natural, and that's the kind of guys that Coach Smith recruited.
Tommy was an excellent teammate. He was a lot better athlete than people gave him credit for. Tommy was kind of an athlete like Bobby Jones, could run, could jump, could shoot from the outside, could score on the low block, and he had a good understanding for the game of basketball.
Tommy got better. He wasn't very coordinated our freshman year, but through hard work and working out, he really got coordinated. He had a nice little jump hook. He would block shots, and he could run also for a big man. You look at a lot of Carolina film and see him beating his man down the court to get layups, pass from field for a dunk.
Played on our Olympic team in '76 and '77. He really come on against Maryland. We played him at home, and he had a great game. We beat a very good Maryland team. It had to be over 20 points. And then in practice 2 days later, he in a simple drill, they tears up his knee, and he's gone for the year.
If that injury would have happened to him in today's modern medicine, it wouldn't have affected him as much. But it really hurt his career. But he could really run, he could score. He was an excellent basketball player for the University of North Carolina.
When he walks in the room, I started laughing. He has quick sense of humor, and when he calls, I'm anxious I start smiling before he says, "Hey, Coach." He really is a great player. He had 4 excellent years, taking the team, as a freshman, a very important part of the team in '77 to the Final Four.
You talk about savvy and toughness. Oh boy, he had it all, and a good athlete with great hands.
He was sure of his game, and he knew how to play, and I think that confident may be a nicer word, I guess, than cocky, but Michael could really play, and the tougher the moment, he was ready to play.
I thought I played real hard. I wasn't going to get outworked. I thought I had some agility. I could go to the basket and maybe get to the free throw line, and I thought I defended well.
Mike was phenomenal. And it was incredible, his cockiness, his arrogance, his ability to score. Michael Corn had phenomenal hands. He was somebody that, was able to catch a lot of difficult passes and turn them into baskets. But Mike had a great feel for the game. He was so much fun to be around as a teammate. He always kept you loose. And here's a guy from Jersey City, just always had a smile on his face, always was ragging on people. And he was one of the great teammates that I had when I was at Carolina.
Okay, and I hit it off from Jump Street. Matter of fact, he'd go to Rocky Mount, spend some time with me, and I'd go to Jersey City and spend some time with him. And it was a lot different.
Michael, with his Jersey accent and just his whole demeanor, he was like fast-paced, fast-talking, just have a good time and so forth.
My personality is pretty much the same as it is now. I enjoy life, I enjoy jokes, I enjoy getting down to the nitty-gritty if you have to.
Corn on the pass to Denard. mark. Taylor will try to stop him, but he can't stop the dunk. Michael Corrin is playing like a man possessed.
I brought some looseness to the team, and that's how I was, and I had a lot of fun in what I did, and I think that's what my peers or friends would say.
Had a real flat shot, straight line drive. And I remember my coach, his name was Robert Curtis, he came into the gym and he saw me shooting the ball. He actually took the ball from me. And he told me that if I'm not going to shoot the ball with some arc on it, then don't shoot it at all. Just get out of the gym and don't shoot it. And I went back home and I started working on it. And when I got to the University of North Carolina, I saw other guys that worked just as hard and didn't have a guy like Coach Guthridge that was real good at helping us, spending the time. It just helped take me to another level. Well, I really didn't get it to my sophomore year. All of a sudden, I felt that, man, I can do just about whatever I want to do here. I mean, I really believe that in my heart that I could do things, that when I got my hands on the basketball, that I could take people, that I could make my shot, that I could rebound, that I could defend.
Al really believes he's going to make every shot. I remember he missed one at Kansas, and he was in the shower crying. We couldn't even get out of there. I was trying to talk to him. It's just a game, you know, but he didn't miss many.
Al Wood was the first person that I'd ever been around that was not only the best player, you know, his last year particularly, but that everything he did, he thought of the team first. Could shoot the heck out of it, but stayed after practice and worked on his shot so much. And I'd sort of look around and say, you know, he's the best shooter and he's out here working harder on his shot than anybody else does. Does that carry over to some of you other guys?
Wood going baseline, jumper good! Al Wood has got 24.
There was a point where I hit a shot along the baseline. I posted up one of the guys and I just turned and shot it. I mean, just like I was in Woolen Gym. And sometimes we would go in Woolen Gym and play ball games, and you get the ball, you score every time. And that particular shot, I hit that shot on the baseline, and I just knew that, man, I can score every time I get it. He kept feeding me the ball, and my eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger because I knew that I could score. I went through the lane. I did some things that I wasn't normally doing during the regular season because, I mean, I just had that feeling, and that's a great feeling to have.
Got by Stokes, comes top of the circle, look away to Wood. Reverse layup, Sampson, 37 points.
He was always working on his game, shooting the basketball, and so you listen to him. You know, you'd be around him, he'd get you laughing, and then all of a sudden he'd talk about what we needed to do to make sure his team accomplished its goals.
I told Coach I'm going to Albany and I'm not coming back because I knew if we could get Sam and Worthy and put those guys together, that we had a heck of a chance to be good.
His demeanor was so calm, and yet a fire burned inside.
People may look at Sam and say, man, is he asleep or what? I mean, is he on a sedative?
But everybody says, what's wrong with Sam? You can't fire Sam up. Come on, guy, get him going. Don't worry about Sam. Sam would take care of business.
His nickname's Big Smooth, and he was smooth. You know, Sam was very cool, but people mistaken his demeanor for maybe not being as competitive or whatever. He would get after it on the basketball floor.
You stand back and watch Sam in practice, and it just looks like he's gliding up and down the basketball court and shooting those little left-handed hooks. Or if we were doing our running programs, he just looked like he was gliding around the track, but he'd be at the front of the pack.
If you played with him or played against him, you knew what that was. It was just his demeanor. It had nothing to do with anything in terms of his skill level or his lack of competitive nature. Four-time All-American, first team. You know, you don't get there being lackadaisical. He was one of the best low-post players I had ever seen. Every single big man, if you take jump hook shots right now, you owe Sam Perkins some royalty fees because he was the first guy I ever seen take a jump hook. Everyone used to take sweeping hooks. Sam started to take jump hooks.
He could throw that jump hook from probably 10, 12 feet out. I mean, he really could jump up and throw that jump hook very well. But all of his techniques, if you go back and look at it, everything was really perfect.
He showed me how to get spots by outthinking the guy, you know, being a step ahead of a guy, putting yourself in a position where you're between your guy and the basket when you go to the basket, creating foul opportunities. Just a bright, bright basketball player. And really, I owe a lot to Sam. He really helped me a lot on my development as a young big player.
Sam, you knew, was going to do a great job defensively, but at the end of the game, he was going to have 16 to 25. He was going to have, you know, 8 to 14 rebounds, and he was going to grade out so positive on the defensive end that you depended on Sam and you could count on Sam every night.
14 years old. He's a sophomore in high school, and he was a manager on the team. And then as a 16-year-old, he's all-state, and fortunately he comes to the University of North Carolina from Black Mountain, North Carolina.
Oh, he's just a little puppy dog. He really was, a little baby-faced puppy dog at 6'11", 7 foot, with a great sense of humor. And this was the big city to him.
We were getting ready to play St. John's in the Hall of Fame game, and Coach Smith walked through the locker room and hung his coat up and came back outside in the hallway and said, "You may want to go say something to Brad. He looks a little scared in there," and he was as nervous as he could be.
Coach Smith was there for me from day one, and he was always very, very strict and stern with me, and it was very good for me because he became like a father figure more than a basketball coach. My freshman and sophomore year, I really tried to play a very aggressive physical style of basketball because just of my build. That's how I grew up playing the game. And Coach Smith changed that. He thought that I had the skill to be a way above average skilled basketball player, and I need to utilize that skill more. So he started working with me on the fundamentals of the game. And by my junior year, I became pretty fundamentally sound as a basketball player. I reached a level I never would have reached being the other type of player. And I thank Coach Smith for that, because most kids who were big and athletic could run, jump, and dunk, but couldn't make free throws, couldn't hit an open 10-foot shot, couldn't pass the basketball. It made me the ultimate weapon at the high post because I was big, I was strong, I could rebound the ball, but I could pass the basketball. So you had to guard me. So I got comfortable shooting the shot from the free throw line. As a matter of fact, Coach Smith used to tell me all the time, you can shoot that shot, shoot it more. I got comfortable knocking that shot down. So that made me effective there. And as I got around the basket, I just felt like I could score on anyone. There was no one that could guard me around the basket because I shot hook shots. And every time I shot the ball within 8, 9 feet around the basket, I knew it was going to go in.
He was the best low post shooter I've seen, pro or college. You know, I played with Akeem. 5 feet from the basket, he never missed. I mean, there were certain guys who missed certain. He never missed. You know, first, I think my sophomore year, his junior year, he started off the season making 13 consecutive shots. You know, over 2 or 3 games, but he didn't miss for games. And because he got the ball in those areas. He teaches big men what to do with the basketball on a low post, because he never brings the ball down, so you can't steal it. He always keeps it chin high, and he turns left and he turns right. He shoots jump hooks with both hands. So he was too difficult to stop once he got the ball in certain positions.
I've always thought that when people pick the top 5 or 10 players in North Carolina, Brad Daugherty is not mentioned, but he was about the most productive player I've ever been around. He would just run down there on that block and we'd throw the ball to him and he'd turn around and score. It was a pretty easy life.
Bill Travers, a local writer, came to see me play, and I was playing against Christ the King, and I kept getting they were pressing, and I kept breaking the press and getting layups, breaking the press, getting the layup, and he's jetting up the court. Kenny the Jet Smith.
Kenny had more than one gear. I mean, it was like, he could go from first gear to second gear and then like to 8th gear. You know, he was the jet. He had it was like jet propulsion.
He was the fastest guy I've ever seen with a basketball. He could take the basketball from one end of the floor to the other. Even after a made field goal, he'll get the outlet, and he would be dunking the basketball at the other end.
We had 4 games in a row where he laid the ball up 4 seconds after the other team scored. You could look on the stat sheet and it would say so-and-so scored at 18-18, and then Smith layup at 18-14. He would run past people and get it to the basket, and he drew so much attention with that ability to put the ball on the floor and take it to the basket that he got better shots for other people.
All those cats from New York who play that playground basketball and pass that basketball, Kenny could find you. I mean, he could thread a needle, had a great eye. He had an innate ability to see the floor while moving as quickly as he did, and that's hard to do. By the time I got comfortable and set up, here comes the basketball. And it was never at an odd angle or anything like that.
Had the high dribble, could really break people down, and you know, a lot of times your plays are not going to work, and they break down. Now what's going to happen? Well, Kenny was able to break people down and make things happen.
I was always felt that a lot of New York guards would get out of control, especially as freshmen. They always leave their feet and fly through the air and get charging calls on them and turn the ball over. Kenny was always under control, even at high speeds.
A lot of times when you see people that are very fast with the basketball, or a lot of people that jump extremely well, they don't shoot the ball very well. But Kenny was a great shooter. With his speed, if you tried to guard his outside shot, he had the ability to drive around you. I was blessed with quickness. For me, was to play in the passing lanes were pretty easy. And the defense that Coach Smith had designed, we used to trap a lot, and we used to force people into making long passes. So for me, I was playing center field. I just pick off passes. And it was very easy for me to get steals playing there. It's the hardest I've ever worked, but I used to get the rewards because I get the steals and the dunks. You know, when I was being recruited a lot of times, a lot of schools would say, you know, we have a great social life. Other schools would say we have a great basketball program. And other schools say we had great academics. And Carolina had it all. JR was fun to coach. He was that kind of new breed of player, power and athleticism that is so prevalent in players today. 6'9" and almost 260, 270, and can run like a deer. He was coming in with a lot of reputation and a lot of expectations. But he came in and said, I'm taking a back seat. And if anything falls in this back seat, I'll handle it. But if nothing falls in the back seat, I'll just be a passenger. By the end of the year, we moved him up to the front seat because of his skill level. He was a man among boys. As a freshman in college, he had an NBA prototype body.
JR 6'8", 6'9", about 270 pounds, really strong around the basket. Had a couple of nice hook shots, but he loved to finish the basketball. Was a good defender, could set up in the post and guard really big guys because he could spread out and take up a lot of space, and it's very difficult to get around him.
He was good so early. He'd come to camp in the 8th grade, and he was pretty big then. He did develop and got better. He can shoot it outside. He really improved his game every year he played, and he's still at it.
There are certain players that I describe, if I'm ever in an alley and I have to get out of that alley, George Lynch is one of those players that I would want on my side. And he's the type of guy that if you weren't doing what you were supposed to do, he'd let you know it.
He was the heart and soul of our '93 championship team. He just wouldn't let us lose. We had other very good players on that team, but George kept everybody going, and it was just tremendous.
George was a consummate North Carolina type player because he was very unselfish, not caring about your own stats, and doing the little things that make teams win, like rebounding the basketball, setting good screens, hitting the first open teammate that you see. And George was all about those things. He did all the dirty work. He just had such a work ethic, never got tired, and played so hard all the time.
Coach would never say he has favorites, but I think the things that George did to make his team better is what Coach believes in. He got all the tough rebounds, made all the defensive stops, did all the little things to help bring the team success, and I think that probably makes Coach as proud as anybody.
He's a great defensive player, a great competitor, and a great leader. I'm so happy that as most valuable player on our 1993 National Championship team, his jersey does hang up in the Rafters and where it belongs. Eric was a huge recruit for us, and his dad, I think, looked at places where they've done well with big men. He contacted us. We were delighted because we think Eric could be a great player, and he turned out to be a great player.
Eric Montross was very fundamentally sound when he arrived at North Carolina. He had good hands. He had decent post moves. Coach Guthridge and Coach Smith took those moves to a different level, and Eric was willing to, spend the time working, and he worked constantly on his low post game. And he didn't have great quickness, he didn't have great lift, but because of that willingness to work and Coach Guthridge, Coach Smith's big man's knowledge, he really developed into a great college player. Duke was a special rivalry. Everyone knows what a great rivalry that is, and our guys could have, broken a leg and wouldn't have known it till after the game, if it happened during that game. It's just one of those things. And Eric was such a competitor. Eric probably had no concept he was bleeding until somebody told him, you've got blood all over you after the game, and they said, you might need a couple stitches there, big guy.
Eric Montross really did and still does mean a lot to the University of North Carolina. Very loyal. Had an excellent career here, helped lead us to the national championship in 1993. We were certainly lucky to get Eric.
The guy was just relentless. The guy wanted to win, and that's the kind of guy that you wanted to be like.
this guy goes hard all the time, and he's very successful. And just coming on a visit one time, you know, just seeing him play in person was just unbelievable. Just the feedback he got from the fans and just the type of excitement he brought to the game was something that you wanted to duplicate also.
Athletically, he was as good as we've ever had here in North Carolina. And he was another one that was tough, that didn't like to lose.
That's another guy who was just hard-nosed, hard worker, refused to lose, relentless offensive player as well as defensive player. I mean, look at him, he's 6'5", 6'6", maybe, playing the power forward, and unstoppable. Guy who led by example. I don't think he really said much. He looked like he just went out there and played ball, played hard. He plays hard every play. You know, and I say that because that's from having to guard him night in and night out in Detroit. He just doesn't believe in losing or not working hard, which makes him a great player, and it's going to make him last long in the NBA.
Athletically and basketball skill-wise, as a freshman and a sophomore in North Carolina, Rasheed may be better than all of us. Rasheed is close to 7 feet tall, could probably outrun 99% of the people at North Carolina, not on the basketball team, but at the University of North Carolina. He has soft hands. He has a great knowledge for the game of basketball. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's super quick, he jumps out of the gym. And with those talents, to me, he's one of the very few guys that I thought would be a pro first time I saw him play in high school.
Just sick. I mean, going to the games and seeing a guy just catch an alley and just dunking and just yelling, and just the enthusiasm he had about the game and his personality. He was one of those guys that always put a smile on Coach Smith's face because he was just so different.
He's an athlete who can pretty much do it all. He can shoot, pass, rebound, block shots, bang with almost anybody.
He could set up on the post and do things that most big guys just can't do, as far as being with your back to the basket, changing that position as soon as he caught the basketball, facing up and shooting the basketball. That's really hard for big kids to get their feet together. Could run the floor extremely well and could catch passes that were bad or good. Made a lot of the guards look good. He could dominate defensively, and boy, he'd go get a lot of rebounds. I mean, he just would go get stuff.
Rasheed is so misunderstood, first of all. He was so very coachable. I enjoyed being his coach for 2 years, and he loves his experience at Carolina, and consequently, I'm happy that he has his jersey there.
I saw Vince play so many times his junior and senior years in high school. And he was just so talented that a lot of times in high school he got by on sheer athleticism, just by being so much better than other players. But in order for him to improve, to get better defensively, I think that Carolina and Coach Smith was really good for Vince Carter. Now, I'm not saying that Vince wasn't great when he got here, because he was a tremendous talent. Boy, he was fun to watch. But I think each year that he was here in North Carolina, he became a better basketball player.
I didn't understand, I didn't know, so I just always asked. And I think they got tired of hearing me. And you know, Coach Ford and Coach Hanners definitely put the time in, just working with me, just becoming better, like getting my shot off quicker, and just to continue to run the floor. And I always said, okay, Coach, what else? And it was always that way, and I think they appreciated that.
But you have to give Vince credit for taking the coaching and accepting the coaching and working hard. A lot of young men probably wouldn't have done that. And he was able to accept the fact that it was kind of rough in the beginning, but boy, did he ever become a force for us.
I think maybe not having a great freshman year might have helped him work even harder throughout his sophomore season. Defensively, he came on as a sophomore. He could guard a 6'5", 10 guy. He could guard a 6'6" guy. It didn't make any difference. He can guard a 6'8".
I got the opportunity to play with 2 great point guards. Jeff was the one who actually started my career as far as Vince Carter being a dunker, because he wasn't afraid to throw it up there either. And that's where it started, and Ed picked off where he left off. And that's his God-given abilities to see guys on the floor, and that was my ability to catch lobs and dunk them. So we put them together and never practiced one time, except for once. I think he wanted to see something or try something from like at the free throw line the other end. We used to practice that, but other than that, never practiced it.
You know, there's times he's knocking over 6 or 7 people. It was just unbelievable. You know, for me, I'm like, this can't be happening. This guy is only in college and he's doing the things that he's doing. And I thought it was no way that I would be able to be successful because I thought everybody was like Vince. Vince wasn't one of those guys who was just, I can jump, I can do this, I can do that. You know, he really cared about the game of basketball and he really cared about winning. When you have a guy with all that talent and who's willing to play as a team and who's willing to do whatever it takes to work on his game, I mean, of course he's going to be a great basketball player and a great teammate also.
Right from the beginning, Joseph was confident. He came in and, you know, he had his work cut out for him. We had some, you know, decent guards, and he just dominated them offensively, defensively, right from the beginning in preseason practice. And he was trying to send a message that, you know, you're going to have to really beat me out to keep me out of the starting lineup. You asked earlier, did you ever hear anybody mention about it? And Joseph was one that, hey, I'm going to be up there. Don't you worry. I'll get my jersey up there. He would kid Coach Ford about it. You're going to be moved over out of the way. You know, you're not going to have that #1 spot anymore.
Joe had a confidence in himself that when the game was on the line, he could make the big baskets, and he 99% of the time he did. And it's nice to know that you have that, you know, on your team. You know, we'd call his number a lot, and big situations would come up, and you know, team would be making a run, and he'd take a tough shot and make it. We knew it, the other team knew it, and they still couldn't stop it. So his confidence and his ability certainly ranks him up there, even though he's here just 2 years as, you know, one of the better players to play at North Carolina.
Brendan was a guy who was recruited heavily, but he came in with the right attitude and listened. Coach Guthridge did just a great job developing his jump hook and all of his big man moves.
The guy wanted to be successful. He wanted to have some life, and to have a big guy down there blocking shots and, you know, really controlling the paint is a luxury. And to have that in college is something that, you know, definitely helped us out a whole lot.
Coach Guthridge did a great job of helping Brendan improve every year. And that's a sign of the player's commitment, but it's also a sign of the coach's commitment to that player. And then the year I coached Brendan, he was in great shape, and he played hard. He could run, he could block shots, he could really get out and slide his feet. He could show out on ball screens 20 feet from the basket. He was really a factor and the reason we were one of the best field goal percentage defensive teams in the country because of Brendan. He set records, for field goal percentage. He went to Final Fours. He'll have his jersey hanging in the rafters. He always says after he's done playing, he's going to take over Dick Vitale's job and be an announcer. So I got to be nice to Brendan so he can say nice things when he comes back and commentates our games.
Jack Cobb is the first Carolina basketball player to have his jersey retired because he was the first National Player of the Year. He was a member of the 24 team that won the national championship, and then 2 years later, he was the National Player of the Year. Jack Cobb's family lived in Durham, and one of the great stories of early Carolina basketball is that in the Southern Conference tournament played in Atlanta, the results were telegraphed back to Chapel Hill via Western Union. And the students waiting for the scores to find out who won the Southern Conference got the results. Carolina had won, and about 500 students actually marched to the Cobb family home in Durham and sang fight songs throughout the night to celebrate that first championship. I think what made George Glamock a legend at North Carolina is his ability to shoot the basket, not really seeing the rim. He knew where he was on the floor by the lines that were painted on the gym floor.
He had great hands, smooth moves, and a sweeping hook shot, which he could do either left or right. So that's where he got the name Blind Bomber, because he was so effective with that hook shot. Glamock averaged nearly 21 points a game during a period when 60-point games were a rarity.
In fact, at Clemson, he scored 45 points in one game, but he fouled out with 3 minutes to go. But it was such a remarkable feat because the world record was at 51 points that the captain of the Clemson team went to his coach and said, "Coach, let him play. Let him get the record." But the coach wouldn't go for that, and he got 45, and he was 6 short of the record.
I got an impression of just what George Glamock meant to Carolina basketball in December of 1978 in Rochester, New York. Rochester was Glamock's hometown, and Glamock had been bothered by arthritis for a number of years and was confined to a wheelchair. And he was brought to courtside in the wheelchair, and the Tar Heels were warming up in front of their bench, and Coach Smith was sitting on the bench watching them warm up. He got up from the bench, went down and spoke to George Glamock, and then turned and stopped the layup drill and had the entire team come over, and one by one, he introduced them to George Glamock. But when I saw Coach Smith pay that kind of tribute to George Glamock, then it made an even more indelible impression on me as to just how special he had been in the history of Carolina basketball.
Lennie Rosenbluth was a great player and great scorer, and we knew that if things got really tough for us, that Lennie would deliver.
I was a streak shooter. Once I got on a roll, I mean, the basket to me looked like a bathtub.
Lennie Rosenbluth was the best shooter I've ever seen. Hook shots, jump shots, anything you want, Lennie could do it. He could just nail it from wherever he wanted to nail it from.
At the end of the ball game, if we're down, give me the ball. I mean, I felt that we were going to win every ball game. I even told McGuire that, which made him very mad. About the middle of the season, I said, "Coach, you know, we're not going to lose any more ball games. We're going to win this thing." And he went berserk. You know, he didn't believe it. But then again, I think after the Maryland game at Maryland, when we were down and they missed a foul shot and we came down and tied it up, and we went into 2 overtimes to win that ball game, I think he became a believer that we were going to do it. And he had confidence in me. And when he said, "Feed the animal,"
we knew where to go. And where we needed to go when we were in trouble was to Lennie. Clearly he missed on occasion, but he was in the clutch. Nobody was better than Lennie in the clutch. I mean, he made a shot against Wake Forest that put us into the finals of the ACC. Took a hook shot when most people would try and take a jumper, but not Lennie. He would try anything, and knowing that it was going to go in.
And the ball went in and the whistle blew, and everybody held their breath. Was it a charge or whether it was a foul? If it was a charge, the basket doesn't count. They got the ball and we're in trouble. And the referee felt that it was a block on their part, and I got the foul shot, which I made. So we went from 1 point down to 2 points ahead. So we made up for the year before, beating Wake Forest 4 times, and especially that ball game.
Parker throws a long one into the left side. They feed it into Stilt, and it's stopped away from Stilt into the hands of Kearns, and we win! 54-53, North Carolina did it!
How many teams go undefeated? How many players end their career without a loss? I still get 2-3 letters a week asking for an autograph, picture, an autograph. So just to be remembered and be a part of the Carolina family 45 years later, it boggles the mind.
Here's a freshman telling everybody that's getting on the bus to play in the ACC championship my sophomore year, don't get on this bus unless you think we're going to win.
I know this, he had my confidence. You know, whatever he said, I was 2 years older than he was, but even as a freshman, you know, when there was a lull in the game or the other team made a run, you know, he'd kind of go like this and bring everybody together as a freshman, which was unusual.
Coach Smith devised this offense that was created even before we had gotten there. And Phil Ford was the perfect match for it. It allowed him to have a tremendous amount of creativity, something that Phil was very good at.
They wanted to double team him, he'd find the open man. They couldn't play him straight up, but sometimes they did, and he'd drive by him, and comes to help. He dishes for a dunk. And then you start, he has the ball most of the time. He's supposed to have it, so then they have to foul him late in the game, and then he made all the clutch foul shots.
When it came time to score, you know, he can beat his man anytime. Under those rules, it was, whenever we went into that four corners offense, you could put it pretty much, you know, put a little notch next to a W.
I couldn't come close to running the four corners like Phil Ford. Everyone thought it was a stall tactic, but when you watched it and you studied it like we did, it was an offense because no one could guard him one-on-one.
He could dribble the ball really low to the ground and still be quick and get by his man and always keep his head up because you notice in those four corners we got a lot of back doors. He made good decisions, could handle the ball. Houston and I just tried to make sure we didn't turn the ball over. And hurry up and get it right back in his hand.
When they see Phil Ford out there, they see North Carolina up by 6 with 4 minutes left and they're in four corners, they got to be thinking it's over. And it pretty much was.
The thing I remember about four corners and something that Coach Smith really got on me a lot when I first got here was judgment. And I think a lot of point guards go through that, using your head, making good plays, making smart plays. And in four corners, it's pretty much a chess match. We worked on it every day in practice, and sometimes he'd get mad when I'd make a bonehead play, and sometimes he would explain to me the correct thing to do.
He had incredible rapport with all the players, and we all got to know him, and probably more importantly, he got to know where we like to get the ball, and he figured out a way to keep everybody happy.
I was very fortunate to play for Coach Smith, who wanted someone on his team that tried hard every practice and tried hard every game and would concentrate to do what he told us to do.
I saw Phil Ford come into huddles at timeouts. I'm not sure he knew where he was.
I've actually had very close relatives at a game to say that I looked them in the eye when I was taking the ball out, and I saw them, but I don't remember seeing them. It's just Coach Smith had us to focus on what we had to do and concentrate so hard on what we had to do, you just kind of forgot about everything else.
Here's Ford trying to catch up Abraham. He leads. He's the Carolina's all-time leading scorer.
I always said, do you think you'd be interested in coaching? And I say, no, you know. He said, I'm not patient enough. And then he comes here and as assistant coach and just steps right in and does a fabulous job of judging talent. My gosh, Phil did that well. He had great rapport with the student athlete without favoring one or the other.
There's a lot of great players who are great players, but they can't teach it. Or a lot of guys who can't play can teach it, you know, or don't play at all can teach it. So just the way it goes sometimes. And he's been a great asset because he was a great point guard, and I think he really helped all the point guards that have come to Carolina succeed and just become smart point guards by him teaching those guys the way he did it.
Coach Ford made me comfortable. He knew exactly how to make everything run smoothly as far as the player-coach relationship and just me feeling comfortable about, you know, Coach Smith and the university and things like that. And I think he's a big part of the way the university's success has been the last 15 to 20 years.
There's a person, you know, who would play with pain, play through injuries, whether it was, you know, an ankle, a swollen elbow the size of a grapefruit, you know, 4 fouls, fatigue. He would figure out a way to finish the game and never, ever got tired. Maybe, you know, one of the all-time best guards ever to play this game. Maybe the best.
He's one I would have said the guy's going to be an NBA player. I mean, he's that far advanced.
Of all the prospects I saw through the years of recruiting, the first time I saw him, he was one I'd say was, he's a can't miss.
In our basketball camp, we have a staff that gets together and decides where, if anybody needs to move up, you know, somebody, and Doug Moe was in charge of a gym with James Worthy going into the 8th grade, I believe, and he was a little taller, but Doug said, my gosh, we got to get this Worthy kid out of this. We moved him up 1 for the next session and moved him up 2, you know, the rest of the week.
Well, I just remember saying that 8th grader is going to be a great player as an 8th grader. I mean, he was, I don't know, 5'7", 5'8", the same frame, the same long arms, the same face, everything, and the big hands, and you knew he had a chance.
The times that I saw him play at camp, he could do whatever he wanted to. It was almost as if, why play your senior year in high school? Why don't you just come on to the University of North Carolina and let's just start playing? He had the total package, and he had the mindset to be able to do it as well. And he was a very likable person. He wasn't an arrogant person. He was the type of person that you wanted to be around, you wanted to associate with, and he was just someone who I was very excited when I found out that he had signed with the University of North Carolina. I mean, everybody got excited because we knew that we had a chance with him.
I remember in early January, we lost to Kansas at Kansas. You know, he wasn't boxing out. And I was ready to bench him, and I told him that in front of the team. And then he did it very well. And then about 2 weeks later, he breaks his leg, you know, against Maryland in Chapel Hill. And that, I think he was going to come on and have a great freshman year.
My heart dropped. My heart dropped. Obviously, we had lost a great player, but for him as well. So I was very pleased and excited for James that he was able to recover.
James was so strong in there, and he was quick with his feet. I always thought he'd be a great dancer. Look how quick he was with his feet in those little tiny areas.
James reacted based on what the defense would do. If he went to his right and the defense didn't react, then he'd keep going. If he went to the left, same thing. If he went to the right and the defense reacted, then he'd just go to another move. Having his hands to be the size that his hands were, and being able to jump off the one foot that he could jump off so well, being able to really go up and dunk on people inside, had that little small turnaround jump shot. He had so many moves.
He had the great offhand and had the ability to turn either way and arch it over, and then all of a sudden explode up and dunk over you. Spin moves, fingertip rolls.
Here's a guy who 1 second was 8 to 10 feet away from the basket, and then within a second, you know, the ball is dunked. And authoritatively, not just laid in or a dunk, you know, that a lot of people consider a dunk. I'm talking about an authoritative, quick, cat-like jam. If you're playing against him, you can't defend that.
The thing that got me about James is the bigger the game, the better he played. I remember we played Furman and Citadel back-to-back in a north-south doubleheader, and I think in both those games, total he had like 13 points and 9 rebounds, and you know, it just wasn't James's kind of game. And then their next game was against Kentucky on national TV, and he has 26 and 15 or something crazy. And
we won the Eastern Regionals in Raleigh, and we were cutting the nets down, and he didn't want to cut them down. He says, guys, he says, I'll cut mine down in New Orleans.
Even the morning of the national championship game against Georgetown, I saw him at breakfast, and I said, are you going to be ready to play tonight, big fella? And he said, Coach, I'll be ready. And I'll never forget how comfortable I felt when it was those simple words, Coach, I'll be ready.
I happened to see Danny Worthy, James's brother, coming out of the elevator and said hello, of course, and I said, what do you think? And he said, I have never seen him so ready.
He kept lifting us. You know, Georgetown would make a couple of baskets and James would do something, give us a little lift. They would make a couple of baskets and James would do something. So emotionally, he kept us up the whole game.
That was James Worthy's finest game all around that he ever played at Carolina. And it came, you could say, at an opportune time.
People obviously talk about Michael so much, but you know, Michael was a freshman. Yes, he did hit the game-winning shot, but James was the man. I mean, James had 28 in that game. James, you know, dominated the game against Houston. James in big games, that's why I call him Big Game James. There's nobody better than James.
I always ask the older players in their pickup games. I said, you know, I asked them about the freshmen, and they said, you know, Jordan's really quick, you know, and a very good player, but he sure talks a lot.
Michael was cocky, but in a good way. I mean, he just knew he was good, and I would tell you that his teammates liked him very much, and because nobody played harder.
I can remember him as a freshman. We played pickup games. I'd hit him with an elbow, and I'd bang him. And I could see some of the timidness in it. But boy, by the time he got to be a sophomore, I can remember playing against him, and he hit me one time. I elbowed him in the chest, and he turned around and elbowed me right back in the chest and said, I'm not scared of you anymore.
I did the running program before the season started. He says, I want to be the best player. And I said, well, then you have to work harder than you did in high school. And he said, well, I worked as hard as everybody else. I said, I thought you just told me you wanted to be the best player.
Michael got better and better every year, every practice, every game. He grew with confidence, and you just saw it coming, and it was just a matter of time.
Every day in practice, when Coach Smith was talking, every player looked at Coach because of the respect, and they knew what they could get from him. But Michael looked right down into Coach Smith's soul.
But I do believe that Michael Jordan has something in his heart or something in his engine that very few athletes in history have.
The guy's got to win. That's it. He has to win, and I always credit that to being the youngest of 3 boys. And his dad would sit there and say, "All right, hey, you know, so what, Michael? You get picked on. Take care of yourself."
I'm sure part of it was that he got cut by his team and didn't like it. I'm sure part of it was stoked by Coach Smith. You know, Coach Smith can stoke your fire, and you know, you'll either respond or you won't.
Yeah, so I really think all of that competitive nature comes from Coach Smith and the way he kind of psychologically got us to go at each other as well as the other team and keep us so sharp. So all of those things that I hear Michael say that he does, I'm like, yeah, you got that from Coach Smith. You didn't think of these things. You weren't that competitive. You were just like everyone else. But Coach Smith kind of put the seed in for him.
Here's Braddock, three-pointer. No good. Tapped in by Jordan. 63-62.
It was our sophomore year against Virginia. We were down 18 at halftime, I believe. We came back, and he made an unbelievable play on Rick Carlisle.
Jordan stole it. There goes Jordan for the dunk. Holy cow!
And then a couple plays later, Virginia takes a shot, and he goes up over Ralph Sampson, grabs the rebound. But he just made big play after big play.
I remember one game where he went down the middle and dunked it after there'd been a little altercation between Ben Coleman and Matt Doherty. And a few minutes later, Michael's got the ball under his arm. We're in the 4 corners, and Herman Veal was supposed to be guarding him. Adrian Branch says, "Herman, go get him." And Herman said, "You want his blankety blank, you go get him."
I had really seen most of the things that this guy could do. 360s, cradling, rocking, but I had never seen that.
And in the locker room, he asked me, he said, I didn't want to watch what Michael, he said, "What did he do?" And I said, "Coach, I can't describe it."
I kept hearing about it, so I did see it on the tape the next day, and it was sensational, and certainly it showed his ability, and I hope that Maryland didn't think it was too showy. I didn't. I kind of like seeing it.
But the first thing Coach Smith said was, one of the things was, "Well, I'm glad you made it." And the second thing he said was, "Do you know Kenny was ahead of you? Why didn't you pass it to him?" So that was the first 2 things that Coach said to him, the true Coach Smith fashion.
I said, they'll remember it when we play them the next time, but then you'll just have to do it better.
Instead of his shooting and his offensive, I was more impressed with his defensive ability. Because when he said, "You know what, I have this whole side of the floor covered," he had the whole side of the floor covered. He was an exceptional shot blocker from the weak side in college, where guys would have layups or beat someone to the basket, and he would come help side defense. And guys have wide open layups, and you think they're layups or dunks, and he comes over and he would just, block shots. And early in his, especially in college, he used to block dunks. So I had never really seen guys go after other guys' dunks and be able to catch them in midair and choke the ball down.
He could guard a point guard, a 2 guard, a small forward, some power forwards if he had to. Michael was the best defensive player in the country, without question.
Would Michael become a great player if he'd gone somewhere else? Yeah, he would have. Would he have maybe done all the things that he's done? Maybe not, because I think Coach Smith has proven that he's helped players become great players. Not only just make it in the NBA, but great NBA players. And you look at the players' comments, they all give Coach Smith a lot of credit.
The greatest thing that Michael Jordan said about Dean Smith, he says that Coach Smith gave him the fundamentals to build a foundation that allowed him to expand and do so many other things with his game. And that's what Coach Smith did. Coach Smith wouldn't accept mediocre or sloppiness from anyone, but he pushed Michael, I think, harder than any player who ever played here.
Coach Guthridge and I saw Antawn play in an AAU tournament. It must have been Antoine's 10th grade year, junior year, and he was outstanding. The quickness, the lateral movement, the toughness, the scoring on the low block. And, Coach Guthridge and Coach Smith, they don't give a lot of credit to high school players, when they see them. But Coach Guthridge just looked at me and said, he doesn't know it yet, but he's coming to North Carolina.
When we recruited Antawn, we knew he was quick. And that's one of the things we liked about him. Plus, he's such a great person from such a great family. But the first time we worked with him, we couldn't believe how quick he was. He has to be one of the quickest, getting the ball, going boom, boom, to the basket.
You can't teach the quickness he had, and we didn't begin to understand how those little shots around the basket were kept going in. You know, you just kind of threw them up and they went in.
He was so fast, and he kind of put the basketball right in your face and shot it. And I used to sit there and think, man, how come I can't block that shot? It's incredible. He's killing this guy. Bigger guy guarding him, you know, or a smaller guy. They couldn't contain him.
He was making all of his post moves, even though it looked awkward. And a lot of people felt it or thought it was an awkward move, which we all did, but you couldn't stop it. And if you get the move that works and you can't stop it, no matter how it looks, stick to it, and he did that.
It was just something I was born with. It just came natural to me. There's nothing that I worked on or nothing that I put a lot of hours into. And that's one thing that's very strange about it. You know, I didn't know I had it until I got there, and once people start, you know, looking at it, like, what kind of shot is that? And the more I started playing, the more and more I started getting comfortable with it, and you know, the most important thing, it went in.
Somebody told me once, I don't know how accurate it was, but in the Duke game here, his junior year, I think he scored 38 points, and they said he had the ball for 63 seconds.
You couldn't keep up with him. He's that new breed of athlete, the size and the strength and the quickness and the speed.
We wanted him to get down to that low block, and he'd go as fast as he could. You could count on him. It's so coachable, and I just can't say enough about him as a human being, as well as being a tremendous basketball player.
Look at it as being relentless. When you're on a break and you see a guy running, try to beat him down the floor. You got the ball on the post, just try to outquick him, and, you know, but still be under control. And I learned a lot of that from Coach Smith. You know, he said, you got an advantage, you know, use that. You know, don't play his game. Don't try to bump and try to push him out the way. Make him play your game. Make him chase you and make him try to defend you and things like that. So it really helped me out, and it really, you know, got me active instead of just standing around waiting for things to happen. I was always on the move and having them always trying to chase me.
He was a quiet leader. You know, when he felt he had something to say, he said it. But he led by example, going out there playing hard. Didn't really mess with anybody, just did the job. He left that to us. You know, we knew he was our leader. He was the guy who was gonna bring it every night, and he was gonna get the touches and lead us to the promised land.
My dad always told me, you know, you're a leader or a follower. And I always said I wanted to be a leader. And I think there's just something in me. I don't want to lose. I want to do whatever it takes to be successful. I want to do whatever it takes to win. And I think just by having that, you know, you just have that knack for a leader. When I was a little kid, I always was pushing and going harder than the other kids, and sometimes thinking I was coaching and things like that. So I think it was just one of the things that it was just naturally in me. To have your jersey hanging from the Raptors is probably, you know, the most important thing as a basketball player. And to have it at the University of North Carolina is just even more significant. You think about the Jordans and the Phil Fords and the James Worthys and the Sam Perkins, and to have your jersey retired among those guys. It was something that was very important for me, and something that I would cherish for the rest of my life.
The common denominator, period, as far as basketball is concerned at the University of North Carolina.
We had to be developed, we had to be coached, and we had to be taught how to play together as a team. And we had the best person in the world to do that in Coach Smith.
He'd bring us in every semester and he'd have our report cards there and say, "Oh, Bobby, you gotta see in that. You got to do better than that." And you know, really kind of like a second dad.
He gave me enough room to be the big, you know, rambunctious teenage kid that I was, but he reined me in a lot of times when I got out of line.
The guy really cares about me. It just wasn't when I was there at the university, but you know, it's been 4 years since I've been there, and he still calling to make sure, you know, Antawn is doing the things that Antawn should be doing, and not too many coaches do that. And he's not even coaching anymore. And for him to still be doing the things that he's doing, it just really shows you what type of person he is.
Taught us how to be basketball players, great basketball players, learn the game, but he also taught us how to become men.
I always tell him that, you know, he's one of the only people in the world that I know that could more or less treat every single person the exact same.
If you're down or something, to call Coach Smith, he'll lift your spirits. You know, everybody knows that. All the former players know that. And Oh, no question. Guys that have struggled a little bit with a job or with a relationship, call Coach Smith. Everything's great.
You know, when I watch him coach, I always feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I always feel somewhat inadequate when I see all the things that he's been able to add to our sport.
His love, his loyalty for his former players is the most genuine thing I've ever known in any aspect of my entire life.
I'm just disappointed that he's not still coaching because I have a young son, and I would hope someday he'd have an opportunity to experience what I did.
When I was coaching here and would go out on the court, there probably wasn't a day that I didn't look up in those rafters and reminisce about some of the players.
I don't think that at any other school that you could put a collective effort of players together and really even come close to what we've had, not only in 1 decade or 2 decades, but 3 to 4 decades.
When you're a kid and you think about watching Michael Jordan on TV and all the great college players that ever played the game, and to actually have your jersey retired, and I mean anywhere it's special. But the University of North Carolina, I mean that's almost like going to heaven.